are part of one of many companies that fall under the Carrier Incorporated umbrella. Carrier Incorporated has lots of brands that are related to smart building automation, fire and suppression, obviously air conditioners. You've probably heard of Carrier air conditioning, so HVAC systems. We fall under the security division. Glen LS2 provides access control and security monitoring solutions to more than 90 of the top 100 Fortune 100 companies in the US. So a little bit about me. I have a long track record in the UX field, both on the consulting side and in the corporate realm. And I started my UX career before UX was even a term that you'd hashtag on LinkedIn. I was making data-driven design decisions to increase sales leads conversions for Paychex, the second largest payroll outsourcer in the United States. They're headquartered out in Penfield. And at the time, my title was web designer, so no UX in my title. And in a nutshell, I was collecting user research and using it to evolve my designs to elicit desirable user behavior. So in the terms of Paychex, that was increasing sales leads for the internal sales team. And at the basis, eliciting desirable user behavior, that's user experience. So today I'm going to be discussing many of the processes that my team uses when we're contributing to user-centered design delivery. And I'll be speaking from a design perspective. However, and that means, how your designers, if you are a designer, how you can effectively, work with your organization. But if you're a technical lead, a product manager, maybe someone from HR responsible for hiring designers, the foundational concepts I'm going to be talking about, it's really going to help you better collaborate with your design resources, whether they're contractors, agencies, or full-time designers. So let me share my screen, which I probably should have done at the beginning. Usually that's taken care of. All right. So let me talk to you a little bit about the team. So Linnell S2 invested in a user experience team in around 2015. And we've always been a small team of designers, researchers, and we have a co-op or two coming from RIT every year doing a stint with us. And COVID hit us like many businesses, mostly because we just couldn't fill headcount, not necessarily because our team was being reduced. We're actually on a growth track for next year and to be adding those headcount back in. And that's mainly due to the positive impact a functional UX team has on our products and is being recognized by our business. So that's really what I'm going to be talking to you about, getting to a point where UX is providing tangible value to your product delivery. But this is my direct reports, but this is not really what Linnell UX is. We also have direct relationships with all of our full stack delivery teams, both co-located here in Rochester, but we also have teams in Gdansk, Poland, and Hyderabad, India. And we have really great working relationships with all of the front-end devs that are part of these different delivery teams, working on lots of products that we have under our umbrellas. And again, this still isn't what I consider Linnell UX, because we have really, really good, solid communication with our product management teams. We have daily Scrum meetings with our product management team. We have weekly collaboration meetings to really understand what it is that they're trying to drive, the strategic initiatives that they're trying to drive into our products as well. So when I talk about UX, this is what I'm talking about. It's your entire organization. Everyone kind of has to be on board. And getting here, that's really what I want to talk to you about, because this is not what I've seen as typical when thinking about design resources in organizations. So what do we work on? OnGuard is our flagship product. It's been around for 30 plus years, and it is as wide as it is vast, with lots of different moving parts. It serves many different personas, the definitions of which we manage through our voice of customer activities. So starting on the left side, our largest persona user base is employees and visitors. So if you take a customer like Microsoft, they have tens of thousands of employees. another, tens of thousands of visitors visiting their facilities every year. So being able to manage those user bases is important, and there's lots of products that we offer that my team directly works on around self-service of those different user bases. In the middle, orders of magnitude smaller, we're talking, maybe tens, hundreds of on-guard users. These are the people who are in the system every day doing active monitoring. We have monitoring specialists that are actively looking at all of the events coming in from various areas of the facilities. Credentialing specialists, if you think about a customer like Amazon, how much hiring and firing they do over the course of a month. And there's lots of UI around streamlining that. And we also offer products for non-technical people like managers to self-manage access on the behalf of their employees. So if they're a floor manager, they can give and revoke access as needed as well. And there's UI around that. And then all the way to the right, on-guard admin, if you have a global system, that's responsible for, hundreds of sites across many countries, you probably still have one or two on-guard admins. And these are the people responsible for making sure the system is configured correctly, making sure the health of the system is being monitored. They do user management. They make sure that buildings are wired correctly. And all of that has its own challenges and use cases and user journeys that we have to understand and map. So the user experience team, we maintain the personas for this entire product. And it is, you might hear, oh, she works for an access control company. How boring must that be? But it's very, very interesting when you start to understand all of the different people that we have to serve. And we're also getting ready to release our first cloud SaaS product, Elements. It was born in the cloud, accelerated by Azure's platform services, and it's built in a way that is going to evolve as fast as our customer demands evolve. And really, the UX team was an integral part of reimagining the complexity and power of OnGuard, but putting it in a solution that everyday people could be able to get right into without massive amounts of training. OnGuard is so complex and so powerful that we actually sell and require training as part of the licensing agreement. Elements turns that all on its head. In fact, everything is different about Elements. The pricing models, the way we sell it is different. The architecture, it's microservices sitting in the cloud as opposed to OnGuard, which is on-premise server-based. Even the way the software is released, OnGuard is released on a yearly cycle. Elements is continuous delivery. Our developers are releasing code to production 30 or 40 times a day. And the UX team, we would have never been able to effectively contribute to a product like this without the tools and processes that I'm going to be discussing. So you've probably heard a lot about design thinking. It's kind of old hat now. In a nutshell, it's how do you discover what it is you should be delivering? And, creating personas, doing contextual research, journey mapping, task analysis, everything that goes into delivering a user-centered product. I'm not going to get into a deep dive of what design thinking is and how it contributes to a user-centered product. I mean, there's wealth of knowledge that you can go look about the activities around both of these processes. But here is the crux of what the takeaway is. You need to diverge and converge on ideas to get to what it is you want to deliver. We have the British Design Council's Double Diamond. We have IDEO's human-centered design process. And really what you're trying to do is, expand your thinking out to discover the opportunity that you want to address. And an opportunity really is a problem to solve. And I'm sure there's many of them in the products that you work on. And once you've really opened up your mind to all the possibilities, you need to distill that back down and focus on whatever the niche is that you're gonna solve, whatever the differentiator in the market is going to be. And then once you've decided that, you need to again diverge out and brainstorm a number of different solutions. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. And then finally, you're going to converge again and commit and deliver something. And there's so much UX activity that goes into doing these steps in this process. And it's not necessarily the activities that you do that's important. Those are well documented. It's finding the room and incorporating that into your delivery process that is very, very challenging for most businesses that I have worked with. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let me paint a picture here. You've hired your first designer. Maybe you are a designer. Maybe you're Lenel UX and you invest in an entire team. And you think magically you're going to get all this, and it's just going to fit right in like a glove into your existing process. And then what really happens? Your designers get overwhelmed with requests, with near-term on-fire deliverables. You got product managers down your back, asking for the designs yesterday. You get very little context. There's very little discussion. There's no back and forth. There's no input. It's just getting things dictated to you. And the result is that design becomes reactionary. It's an afterthought. And there really is no longer any room for the activities needed to do effective design thinking. So the best laid plans go out the window. So how do you implement textbook UX? If you're a designer, how do you effectively do the activities that you need to do to be effective in your organization? And there's a lot to say about the sausage making that is UX, and how this fits in. So I guess I'll just get into it. There's nothing awkward about our teenage years, because that's what it is, right? You're awkwardly trying to fit your services into the business and provide value. Now, this isn't me, although I feel like I'm looking at my spirit animal. And in 2015, the UX team at Lenel S2, we were very green, and we were putting out fires moment to moment. Nothing was strategic, nor could it be. We were siloed on our little design island, kind of spinning our wheels. We weren't responding to the right problems. We weren't talking to the right people at the right times. And quite frankly, we were driving product management and developers nuts with unreasonable designs, designs that were missing the mark or hard to implement. And all the while also basically producing fractured UI that, created inconsistency across our products. And what I'm describing is not very uncommon in, fledgling design organizations. So how do you get to a better place? I don't really want to sound ridiculous, but this is how you do it. You recognize the problems and then you fix them. And I will give Lenel S2 all the credit in the world. I've worked for a lot of different organizations, and they have a deep culture of what we call the retrospective mindset. Retrospectives are a key component of the agile delivery process, and it's where you acknowledge what's going well and reinforce it, recognize what's going poorly, and then commit to making changes that address what is going poorly. It's really a formalized way of recognizing the problems and then fixing them. And at Lenel S2, there is no process that is sacred. Everything gets a retrospective. And that's what we tapped into in order to improve our ability to contribute to our products. So using that retrospective mindset, we concluded that there were two weaknesses in the way that the UX team was engaging the organization. So the first weakness we needed to address was our lack of engagement. We needed to develop relationships so that we were included earlier in the process. And this is what I call getting in on the ground floor, where we can contribute and be a part of the shared understanding of what needs to be delivered. I kind of talk about it. I want to be at the table when everyone else doesn't know what we're going to deliver. I think there's a habit of designers being an afterthought when, oh, we just need a pretty front end slapped on this thing. And you're basically the hands of other people. And really, that's not where you want to be. You want to be at the table when everyone's figuring out what it is we should build. The second weakness is being able to produce fast enough. The design thinking process, there is a lot of output that needs to come out of all of that, and choosing, what activities you want to engage in and how to get that information out in a usable way fast has traditionally been a problem for us as well. So let's talk about getting in on the ground floor. Problem number one, the traditional agile UX process. This is what I think many people think of when they think about agile UX. You have designers working maybe one sprint ahead of the developers. Now, problem number one is that if you look at kind of how the design is feeding sprints, those are mini waterfalls to me. And waterfall development is very fragile. You get all your stuff together, at the front of it and commit to it. And then, you always know more the next day, right? And basically, 1 week later, you have new information and those requirements inevitably change. So waterfall is an old practice. That's not how you deliver products, in the modern era. So that's number one. Number two is you have designers right smack dab in your development process when development is actively happening. And again, this is very fragile. If you go out and get some voice of customer, and again, if you're designing one sprint ahead of developers, it probably means you don't have a lot of time to be doing that activity anyway. But let's say you did, and it throws a monkey wrench into your designs. You're in sprint 3, there's a whole bunch of stuff already solidified, and you find out, wow, I totally missed the mark on this. You have two options. You're going to blow up your delivery schedule, or you're going to ignore the voice of customer that you just received. Both of those are not ideal solutions. So there's very little room to recover when doing agile UX like this. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to start somewhere. And if you don't have a healthy, well-defined backlog and with voice of customer and design thinking built into it, then this is really what you got. And we worked like this for the longest period of time, but it's unsustainable and ineffective. Because hopefully this comes across the Zoom meeting, because you don't have the ability to look at the totality of what you're delivering. You're looking one sprint ahead, designing for whatever it is that they're committing to for that little piece. So one use case, a couple user stories out of the 20 that make up the entire feature. So I had a designer send me this fun little meme the second day he was on the job, when we were getting him into the agile process. And it really holds true. The result of working this way, where designers are really hyper-focused on whatever the next sprint is, you get weird oddities, missed requirements. You don't really get to see, well, what is it that we're driving towards? And taking all that into consideration. It's also unsustainable. Agile UX is putting you right here in the development cycle. This is the slowest and the most expensive point in time to do iterative design. If you think about, those little cascading waterfalls, you design one thing, it's going to go into production. Hopefully that's what you're going to put out and test, gather research, and then hopefully the results of that research would feed into the next sprint. It never works that way because doing development is the slowest and most expensive portion of the process. And really what you need to do is find a way to move your designers back in the process where everything is faster and where all the iterative design is faster and cheaper. And yeah, if you can get out into the design and research phase, yeah, you're going to save lots of time and lots of money. But really, if you can get to that table when no one knows what it is that they're going to deliver, you can rip out, iterative designs like multiple in an hour just by having the conversations with the right people and doing some whiteboarding. So that's what you want to do. You want to move your designers back and get them at the table here. And really, at the nutshell, that's the question. Getting them there gives you the time and room to put all of these activities in place. So how do you solve this? Really, the answer is you can't wait for requirements, you have to contribute to them. Now, it is a fool's errand to ask for and demand requirements sooner. You're never going to get them sooner. You're only going to get them when they're ready. And quite frankly, even when they're quote unquote ready, they always change and people have misunderstandings, and really you're better served to have half-baked requirements, 2 weeks early than fully formed requirements, 2 weeks late. So really that's the crux of it. Get to the table and contribute to the requirements. Don't sit around waiting for them. And again, kind of plays into the, how do you solve the problem where designers are kind of seen as the people who slap the front end on after everything has been decided. So let's see here. In order to solve this problem, we kind of have to understand, in order to understand the solution, we kind of have to understand the problem. And the typical communication looks something like this, where you have product management owning the keys to the kingdom, and they're going to have, some conversation with design, and it won't be the whole story. Product management is kind of going to censor some things, not maliciously, just because they're trying to save time, be expedient, only give the designers what they think they need. But again, there's all this context that designers are going to be missing. And then to further compound the problem, designers are going to whip up the front end and pass it on to development, who during this entire conversation has yet to see any of the requirements, understand any of anything related to feasibility. They're going to have questions and not going to really have the best lines of communication to challenge anything that's coming down and landing on their plates. And to make matters worse, you have side conversations happening. You have product management directly communicating with developers, cutting out design. So you miss context there. And then you have designers who have their own pet projects and things they want to change, and they're talking directly to development as well. And it's just a lot of frustration for everyone involved. And right as the UX team had been determining that this was what needed to be fixed, the Elements program was ramping up, and they had identified this exact problem, and they wanted to address it and change the way that they were delivering product as well. So what the Elements team ended up doing was making me a product owner of Elements. And that really gave me permission formally to sit at the table and listen to what the product managers and what engineering technical leads were talking about as far as what they wanted to deliver to make the Elements come to fruition. And it looks something like this in our Elements program. We have the product right in the center, and you end up having spheres of influence. A product is made up of many different areas of expertise. And if you look at the agile philosophy, generally you have a single product owner that is tasked with delivering the product. But very rarely do you have one person who can do all of these things by herself. And if that person isn't talking to everyone who can own these different activities, then you're going to have deficits in your product. So for Elements, we found 3 areas of expertise that needed ownership. We have product management. They own customer relationships. They're probably feeding a lot of that into the user experience team for voice of customer research. They also own strategic planning. What's the roadmap for this product? Why we're building it? For who? We have financial forecasting that they own, sales and marketing relationships. There's commercialization activities that are owned by product management as well. Then you have engineering. They offer the technical expertise. How is it going to be built? Architectural diagrams, and so forth. They do feasibility studies and technical readiness. Cybersecurity always needs to be considered, and that's what they own. Ultimately, engineering owns the code that is going to be implemented. So they need a seat at the table because they need to influence the decisions that would affect the code that they're going to build. And then finally, you have user experience people. You have the design processes we do, the design thinking, the user research that we do, usability studies, demand testing. Demand testing is super interesting because we can work with product management very early on and test whether we're even going to build the right thing. Our user experience team, we manage, we own accessibility. So we have to make sure that accessibility is being thought of and incorporated into any engineering processes. And really, if any of these areas of expertise are being neglected, that's a gap in your product. So really, the Elements program worked very hard to identify and formally bring to the table people who could intelligently talk about all these parts of the product. And that's really what you need to do. Is it doesn't matter how you get there, but what you need to do is have people who can represent these areas of the product and have them define those features that are part of the product together. You have to negotiate scope together. You have to have regular communication on the progress of the pieces of the puzzle that make up this feature. You have to have consensus on scope, pivots, and changes. And no one would ever expect a user experience manager to walk in and unilaterally tell a development team to pivot and not do this thing, not this other thing. That's ridiculous. And it should be thought of as equally ridiculous to have a product manager or an engineering lead do the same thing unilaterally. It needs to the biggest point here is that there needs to be consensus. And that's not to say that everyone has an equal vote. It's not to say that, one person is a dictator. That is all self-organizing agile thing. Whatever the hierarchy of decision-making that needs to be created for your business to work, that's self-organizing, and you can do that. What needs to happen is that everyone gets on board and everyone understands the decision, so that that shared understanding of what the product is maintained. So that's what you have to get to. And and what that looks like on a daily basis for us is a continuous feature grooming process where all of those different constituencies meet and agree on what a feature should be. So we have one feature here running horizontally, and we have a cadence of meetings. Our meetings are once a week. We meet with all these people. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on the health of our backlog. And in the top swim lane, we have the group activities that are happening. And in the bottom swim lane, we have the UX team design activities that are happening asynchronously that are feeding into the group. And you probably have some other design swim lanes happening. You have architectural planning, you have cybersecurity, you have commercialization activities that are probably happening that are feeding into the definition of what this feature is and how it's going to be delivered. But the takeaway here is that design, if that's the first meeting that you're going to be talking about feature one, design is already at the table providing some initial wireframes so that everyone can kind of bounce ideas off of the group. And really, maybe the next meeting, some details are added, some acceptance criteria is written out and agreed upon. Maybe the third meeting, more design revisions are coming through. Maybe we'll skip the fourth meeting because we're working on a different feature. Tech reviews, usability, cybersecurity threat assessments coming in, technical feasibility gets fed in. And really, this group is tasked with driving the feature to what we call definition of ready. And that's a formal definition. There's criteria that it has to meet. But really what it means is, does a team lead fully understand it? And can he take that feature to his team, break it down into user stories, and then deliver it? And at any given time, we're working on multiple features. They're all in process at varying stages of readiness. And being able to stagger features like this allows, wherever the questions need to be answered, it gives them time to go out and independently get those questions answered. So for design, if feature one, we have doubts about, the way we want to implement it as far as, what a user would be expecting here, it gives us time to go out and do the user research and bring it back and influence what it is this feature is going to be. But it applies to everyone. If there is technical readiness that has to happen, engineering has the time and bandwidth to go and do that and bring the results back in and feed these feature definitions as well. So I'm kind of hand waving getting this in place. The change management needed to install a process like this is quite extensive, and you really need a lot of people that are committed to doing business this way. And a lot of difficult personalities that need management. You probably don't have product managers used to having designers challenge whether we're building the right thing. You probably aren't, designers probably aren't very used to sitting in on meetings where engineers are talking about the stack that they plan to use, or the microservices architecture that they're using to develop some feature, or the authentication mechanism. So you need designers to start learning and being able to talk the talk. And really, finally, it's just a matter of getting everyone to understand each other and be able to communicate with each other. And it took, I'm going to say, our organization probably 6 to 9 months, 6 to 9 months to get this installed and in a place where it was highly functional. And half of that was the developers kind of had to get the backlog out the door that was already committed, kind of using old methods. And half of it was having designers be able to catch up and get all the hot on fire things out of the way, and being able to pick and choose where they wanted to, put their influence. There was definitely features where we said, we're going to pass so that we can work on this more important feature, this more at-risk feature. And so that process, 6 to 9 months to to really make the room for us to have to be able to contribute on a weekly basis to these meetings. So the next problem is that developers are human, and actually this is not a problem. Developers, we want them to be, we want them to be independently minded, and this is really a problem with us because we had this really horrible habit of getting our designs done. And we're like, oh, this design is done. And we would say, chuck it over the fence and say, we're done with our thing, now you go do your thing. And you can't really be upset with designers. If you're not around to answer questions, they're gonna get it done however they need to get it done. And if you're not around to help them, then you can't be mad when they choose by themselves. And that's really what we were doing, is we were chucking things over the fence, and there was miscommunications and gaps that weren't addressed, and then the developers just figured out how to do it without our input. And then we would be unhappy because the designs weren't implemented to spec. There were things missing, like intellectual leaps taken, and we weren't a part of the process. And the good news is that this is a very easy fix. Designers, stop chucking your masterpieces over the fence. Start doing drop-in conversations. Poke in to your front-end developers and see what they're doing. Ask to see in process develop. Ask if they have any questions. Use real-time communication tools. I mean, we have developers in Gdansk, Poland, and Hyderabad, and they're off our time schedule, but we leave them messages all the time so that when we come in the morning, we can see if they've, we've got that like 1 hour overlap, and we can have the conversation then. And this is also true for other product owners and other technical leads. Make sure you're having conversations with them. So if your developers don't go to you and they go to those other people, there is a united message coming back, so that the developers are going to hear the same thing from them that they would hear from you. And just a few minutes a day can provide huge dividends. I mean, technical requirements around accessibility and usability, that happens in development. It's often not easily communicated with flat designs without lots and lots of context. And also those micro experiences that really provide that finesse and the sense of delight when UI feels right, that happens during development as well. And really, designers, you gotta get out of your box and start getting into the technical field. Learn how to deploy your own resource group so that you can see in-process work. Lots of designers are really afraid to do that, and all it takes is asking the right developer, hey, can you just spend a couple minutes teaching me how to do this? And just like that, you've just developed a relationship with your developers that's gonna pay dividends. And this is the key happy utopia state you want to get to. You have designers and developers all living together in harmonious existence, asking and answering questions and feeling like one team. So it's not the UX team and it's not the front end team. It's everyone is driving towards a single vision together. So the key takeaways for getting in at the ground level: textbook Agile for UX is secretly waterfall and doesn't account for ideation and research. In order to create that time you need to do ideation and research, you need to be at the table understanding that feature roadmap. Feature roadmaps must be groomed regularly with the right representation of product management, technical, and UX. Those feature designs, they're already going to be 70 to 90% complete before development. And I mean totality, not just what is needed for that sprint, the feature that is made up of lots and lots of use cases that are going to be developed over a few sprints. And that is due to that grooming process and being at the table at the beginning. Like that gives you so much runway to make those designs complete, and consider everything together and then break it back down into smaller deliverable pieces. And the rest of those designs, you're never going to get those done because there's always unknowable unknowns. And those are what the developers discover during development. And you need to be there babysitting those designs. Don't leave your developers hanging on that. So the other big weakness that we had to address was producing fast enough to make it in the product. How do you get research fast enough? How do you get definitive answers? How do you reduce risk in your designs? And do it fast enough so that the developers don't leave you behind, because the world's going to move on without you. Like if they need to deliver and you're still waiting for some customer feedback, they're going to go. So how do you do that? Number one problem, we loved being right too much. In other words, we hated being wrong. And as humans, we all inherently feel like we can predict the impending future. So being halfway through a design that you know just isn't going to work, or you're halfway through a design and it's not your best work, you think it's ugly, you want to start over, it makes you uncomfortable, because you really don't want to put it out in public and get that criticism. You're going to feel embarrassed. And we are very guilty of iterating on our own work, strictly based on our feelings and predictions, because we didn't want to be wrong publicly. And if there's one thing I have to constantly relearn, it's that we can never predict how a user is going to use the UI that you produce. You're going to be wrong a lot. And that just makes internal wheel spinning pointless and a waste of time. So how do you fix a team that hates being wrong? Make being wrong more productive and less painful. Now, let me paint a picture here. Imagine spending 4 weeks on a design. You put every pixel in its place. It's just a fantastic, beautiful design. And then you put it in front of product management or a developer and you find out, oh, the UI components that you want created are gonna be too expensive and too time sensitive to deliver. And you've missed some key workflows that you haven't even considered. And the priority of information and content is just not, you just missed the mark on it. Now imagine spending 10 minutes whiteboarding and getting immediate feedback. It's kind of a no-brainer, but I will tell you, as fledgling designers, we were doing the first thing all the time. And it's interesting because we have co-ops coming into our group every year, and every single time I give them a project and the first thing they do is open up Sketch and go right for high fidelity. And it's that scenario over and over and over again. And the first thing I do is say, no, we need to back that up. I literally tell them, produce something super ugly. Like, I don't care if it's on a napkin, that's what I want to see. So let me show you something that is super ugly, but also incredibly beautiful. This is Envision's Freehand. It's basically an online whiteboarding service. And I mean, you can't draw a straight line. Nothing ever matches, like boxes are never closed. It just produces ugly. But you want to know why this is so awesome? Is because there is so much wrong with this particular set of diagrams that we were working on for this product. And it took 20 minutes to whip something up. It took an hour to get product management into our whiteboarding session. And we figured out so much within that hour that it would have taken, with high fidelity, it would have taken 2 weeks plus a week of research to get the same amount of information. And I mean, look at all of the information that's here. Like all these notes, we had product management leaving notes on the fly, like collaborating with us in this product. And in an hour, we found like instant no-goes with like the workflows. We just misunderstood the requirements. We found UI paradigms that were actually being reused elsewhere. So we reduced rework just immediately, like right in low fidelity. We identified workflows and feature requirements that PM had actually not even considered. And all of that, I mean, we just blew this up, but it was so fun. This is the type of meeting that designers live for, because it's so collaborative and it really, stretches your brain muscles. And it was so fun because the design hadn't become sacred. No one fell in love with with the pixels they had pushed. And it was easy and painless to destroy. So I guess what I'm saying is really redouble your efforts and focus on lo-fi and stay there much longer than you think you need to. This is what I encourage the majority of the design work to be, because this is where you reduce risk, and you can reduce risk really fast. And when I say reduce risk, I mean, you push pixels and get a really high fidelity design. You don't want to change it. That's more expensive, especially if it goes to development. So the more you do this, the less you have to rework at the high fidelity stage, and you're saving time and you're saving cost. Another problem, user validation was taking forever. And when we were, little teenager, UX teenagers, when we were just starting out, you're thinking about the agile UX workflow, and you're working a sprint ahead, and you want to use real development and put that in front of users, a workable prototype. And what the problem was we'd have to wait for developers to produce enough that was workable to put in front of customers, so that there was things that they could click and accomplish. And that pushed us mid to late development cycle. And that's too late to be developing, to be gathering user research. So what would happen is you have to wait that long, you get the user research, they would throw, the user research would point to, hey, we should change this, we should do that. And you're halfway through the development cycle and all of that work gets backlogged. And then the following year comes around and it just doesn't hold a candle to the new product development coming in. So you'd never get a chance to see any of that user research make it into the product. So we thought to ourselves, okay, can't wait around for live development. It's too slow, it's too expensive. Let's do clickable prototypes. But that too, if done incorrectly, can be very, very expensive. This is a sketch file for all the screens for a clickable prototype that we had in Envision. And I mean, it wasn't even a very complicated workflow. And it was about 50 screens, and that can drown a small team. Or if you're a single designer, I mean, you want to spend like half the week just doing this one thing, and you got like 10 other things you got to accomplish. It's just unsustainable. So how do you fix this? You got to be picky about what you test. So we found, when we did an audit of how we were building our clickable prototypes, we found, wow, we were making a lot of screens that we actually don't need, that aren't really contributing to our increased understanding of our products. You can learn so much from errant clicks that do nothing versus showing the error or showing some subsequent screen. Envision does a really good job of telling you where they click. You can have a conversation about it in your session, and you don't have to do the work for a screen that doesn't really contribute to that conversation. You also have to design with testing in mind. So let me talk to you about, how does exploratory design actually work? And I know I was guilty of this when I was a designer, and maybe this sounds familiar to you guys. The designer will take some key landing page, right? And then they always go, what do they understand the most? And they're like, I'm just going to get all that out of the way so I don't have to think about it anymore. So, they say, oh, I really understand this favoriting system. I'll do all the screens for that because we're going to need them anyway. So I might as well just do them. And then, oh, the bulk delete, super easy. Let me just get that out of the way. And then, we got to spend a lot of time doing all of this like add and delete stuff and modifying. And I really understand that. So let me just get that out of the way so I don't have to think about it. But these are the things you don't have questions about. These are all the slam dunk items. When you really think about what your assumptions are and what you think the customer is going to want, it's all maybe part of this other feature that's not well understood. Maybe you didn't have a really good conversation with product management about it. And you have no screens to test. And you have not made a dent in understanding the feature more because you didn't attempt to tackle it first. So really, you got to change the way you think about starting your designs. Start with what you understand the least, because that's what you want to test. And that's going to get you the screens you need to test sooner. And then, I mean, honestly, some of these other screens, you can go and have you can commit to a feature, and the developers are like, oh, we're going to need that one screen with the error message on it. And that's something you can whip up in 20 minutes, as they need it. It's not something that they need for estimation purposes. It's not something they need to like really deeply understand, because it's a slam dunk and everyone has the same shared knowledge. So really work on figuring out what you want to test, what you want answered, and then do the designs you need for that first. And finally, get it tested ASAP. So now you have designs that are ready sooner to get tested. Don't wait around afraid to be wrong. So we have here a session with a participant, and this is a list of events happening. This is a visitor management application we have. And this guy he's really struggling to find where you check in a specific person who is coming to visit for a specific event. And we had been kind of internal wheel spinning, and the designer who was working on this really, came to the conclusion, oh, I really think that this is not the right thing. And this was before we did the testing. And he's like, I really think that I made a mistake. We really shouldn't have an event-centric view, a list of events. We should have a visitor-centric view, a list of visitors that you can easily check on and off. And he wanted to spend an extra week doing additional designs and have that tested instead. But don't be afraid to fail and test ASAP. And you follow those rules. We said, nope, this is what you designed this week, and this is what's going to get tested. And the designer might say the bad conclusion is, the testing proved my assumption correct. We didn't need to test because I was right. And ooh, I need to like plug in my laptop. You know, that's the wrong takeaway. The right takeaway is that you got confirmation, definitive confirmation that your design needed to change, not just a guess that you were working on. And there is so much other information that we gathered from that design session, that testing session that we did, that also played a part in some of the decision making we did with future design iterations. So again, you know, what was the root cause analysis here? You had a designer who was afraid to be publicly wrong. He didn't want to put the designs he thought were wrong in front of participants. But really, the best course of action is to fail fast and then recover fast. So you get the confirmation, hey, this does need to change, and you do the work to change it. Or our best case scenario is you're proven wrong and this worked out fine, and then you don't have to do the work. It's a win-win when you test early and test as fast as you can. So finally, I want to talk about design consistency. And it's interesting because you would think, you know, as we improve the UI components that are a part of our designs, it would create upheaval in our products because the UI is improving. You know, so we've worked on this area of the product and has these components, and then we do research and find out, oh, it's a better experience to do these components this other way, and that's why it's different. It's because we're improving. However, when we were awkward teenagers, that's not what was happening. All the design inconsistencies that were making it into the product were actually our own fault because we did not have an ability to organize and maintain the design knowledge we needed across our team. And our team was small. It was just a handful of designers and researchers at the time. You know, if you have a larger team, that problem compounds very, very quickly. So along with, you know, the inability to organize your design system, designers are also just going to be designers sometimes. And I've said this, I've heard this many times. I've probably said it a couple times in my career. Why use a well-established UI paradigm? I did that last time. And designers, we're creatives. We want to solve things in new and novel ways. You know, that's really not an efficient way to solve design problems for fast-moving products. So what you need is some design discipline and a system. And what I want to show you is, I think everyone, when they hear design system, they think of this left side. You have some components that are reusable, and designers are pulling them into their designs. And when they're creating new designs that need to be componentized, they recontribute them back into that back into that repository. And then you have this cycle over here. However, that's not a complete and holistic design system. You need a developer equivalent. You need UI components that developers can pull from and implement on a reusable basis. And then as new designs are being fed into development, they need to evaluate those, develop with extensibility, and componentize those pieces, and then contribute them back into that same shared repository. And the Linnell UX team, our components are named the same as the components on the development side. So we use the same terminology for colors, for different components, and that allows developers and designers to use the same language. And so this is where you want to get to. And for us, the biggest hurdle here was having someone with, you know, technical expertise to own and stand that up for us on this side, because you need team leads invested in this process and invested in this ecosystem, because they have to plan the work it takes to consider the UI, make sure that you componentize the right things, make sure you build them in an extensible way, and then contribute them back into the repository. That's extra work that has to be considered. So, you know, you need to have everyone on board in order to make this work. This is where you want to get to. So the key takeaways for producing fast enough to make it into the product: you got to make being wrong less painful and more productive. You got to design with testing in mind, and you have to insist on consistency with a holistic design system encompassing both design and development components. So in summary, make sure your design team is present and contributing during the preliminary, you know, feature negotiations. And we did that through increased product ownership. But there's probably other ways that you can incorporate designers earlier into the process. And then you need to make room to facilitate effective design activities that positively impact your delivery and further optimize your design resources so that they deliver fast enough to stay relevant. And with that, I think I have, just about 10 minutes to answer any questions you might have.
Ashley, thank you. Very thorough. Really enjoyed that. Some of the points you brought up, I wish I would have heard your talk about a year or two ago.
I wish I knew it 10 years ago. Yeah.
One question that really came to mind for myself personally is this idea of getting to the table. What needed to be in place at Linnell for design to actually get to the table?
So it was very challenging for me to just create the relationships with product management. At Linnell, it was a very segregated group for some reason. And they just weren't in the habit. They were all old timers and they just weren't in the habit of having that dialogue. So really it was a matter of just getting in there and letting them know that I was there to help. And so it just started with hallway conversations. Hey, Brian, I heard you're working on this thing. I'm really interested in it. It sounds really cool. I'd love to just get your take on it. And you schedule half an hour meeting. And then the half an hour meetings kind of turn into an hour meetings when you're really getting into some of the, some of the nitty gritty. And then, maybe you bring in one of your designers, and it's really just this like incremental thing that doesn't happen overnight. That is relationship building. That was the key to doing that on OnGuard, which is our long-standing flagship product. That lots of ingrained processes there, and really, for startup businesses, you guys have all the advantages in the world because you're starting from nothing. There's no change management that you have to manage. You can just say, this is the process I want. Here are the people that are going to be involved in it, and you can just hit the ground running. And that's really kind of what ended up happening. Obviously Linnell is not a startup, but Elements as a program really had a startup mentality. And, we picked the developers we wanted, we picked the team leads that we wanted, everything was handpicked. And we said, this is the framework that we want. UX is a product owner and they're going to be at the table and they're going to have vested ownership here. And that really kickstarted the entire, the entire paradigm of having UX at the table contributing.
Cool. Also too, just interested in understanding from a user persona, having worked in the enterprise B2B side of this with OnGuard and Elements, how many user personas are involved, or do you guys maintain or continually discover? Like, what is your count at?
So I would say Elements, because it's, it really is an MVP product, and it's very, very tightly contained to a very specific set of verticals. We have about, I'm going to say 3 that we reference on a daily basis. Every conversation is one of those 3 personas. There's probably maybe 3 or 4 other ones that tangentially come in when we're dealing with some corner cases. OnGuard is much more than that. I'm trying to count off the top of my head. I think there's probably in a given year, our release is about 12 months for OnGuard. I'm saying we're probably referencing 6 to 8 personas of varying, OnGuard has personas that are like in the buying process, people who never even touch the product. And then you have all of the different job requirements of the product that are very segmented. You have like the monitoring specialists and the security guards and all that. So there's probably 6 to 8 that we work on in a year, but in totality, there's probably close to maybe 15 total, depending on what part of the product we're working on in any given release.
Yeah, there's always more than there seems to be on the surface, right?
Oh yeah, and then and then you get into the whole because there's always one, but it's kind of different when it's a small business versus a large business, but it's really like the same, like they do the same things, but there's all these nuances depending on the vertical or the size of business that they're a part of. So managing that does get a little tricky.
So I'll give one last minute for any last minute questions that come in while people are thinking. I'll shamelessly plug the upcoming events for the rest of the week. Tomorrow at 3, myself and an old colleague of mine will really be diving into the relationship between design and product. And then following that up at 4, we're doing a mixer event between the design track and the Startup 101 track. We'll have some great breakout talks and some networking opportunities for folks. And then on Thursday at 1 o'clock, we have Mike Lamont from M&T. He's our keynote speaker of the week. He will be looking at the design process at the fintech side and his big scale, how he built it there at M&T. And then we'll conclude the week with a Future of Design panel. And I believe that is in the mid-afternoon. Sorry, I don't have the time right in front of me. Oh, we got one last question that came in regards to open source storyboarding software that you recommend. Is there anything that you know?
So we're using Envision's Freehand. I think that's free for even personal accounts, so you can check that out. I'm trying to remember, there was another one that we had experimented with that did have a free tier. The name's not coming to me, but there's a few on the market. If you just do a search, they'll come right up, and you can test them out. I mean, that's kind of
what other tools are you guys? What other tools is the design team using?
So our stack, we use Sketch for our designs, and Envision does our prototyping and our whiteboarding, and we actually use Git to do our design repository. Although I don't recommend that. There's way better options. We just have security. We can't put a lot of our intellectual property on the cloud. Carrier's somewhat conservative, but I mean, Figma and Adobe all have like cloud solutions for managing your design files. So our main stack is Sketch, and we use their built-in library system and Envision for our prototyping and whiteboarding. Envision also has a design system management tool. And you probably should check that out. I think it's much more streamlined and integrated with their competitor to Sketch, which is Studio. So I've heard that's up and coming. So that might be something you want to check out. But I think from what I've heard and from the co-ops that I mentor, Figma is, I think, the up and coming design tool that all the college kids are graduating with knowledge of.
It's the new cool hotness out there.
The new hotness, yeah, exactly.
So actually, that's one last question. We got some celebrating Figma on here on the chat.
Wish we could use
running a department though. How do you determine? I mean, because you need consistency, right?
Yeah.
So how do you determine when is it time to adopt maybe Figma or the next great hotness from your tool suite?
So I mean, consistency as far as what the UI looks like across your product. I mean, you're always striving for consistency, right? You want the same experience, one area of the product as opposed to the other. That's not reality in that, I mean, if your product is as huge as OnGuard, I mean, we have a yearly release cycle. So basically it's probably 2 or 3 years before you get to come back to the same area that you just worked on. Like that's how long it takes. So that's 3 years of incremental changes in your UI. So there is basically a few different versions of UI out in the ecosystem, at least for us. Now, I know that Envision, they have their design system manager, and it has versioning built in. We haven't had the pleasure of being able to use that, but basically you can lock in your UI components, both on the development and design side, and version it and say, okay, this part of the product is on this version, and for X period of time, it's just going to be using that. And if you changed your date component, well, you got to wait, you got to time the release to update the version of that. So there is some systems around managing that. For the team as small as ours, and for the way our development teams are set up, we've just said, you know what, when we come up with better ways of doing the date picker, it's just going to make it into the product, like as teams touch that part of the product, and we're just going to live with different date pickers across our different clients. And that's just the decision we've made.
Yeah, you can't do it all at once, but
right.
We are at the end of the hour. I want to give everyone stay true to that time. Ashley, thank you so much for your presentation. Well received, great reviews. I enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone on the call enjoyed it greatly. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good day, everyone.